Hey guys, welcome in. It is Brad with College SportsCast. We're here to do our 2024 SEC football season preview. All right, guys, that was our new little intro that I got for us. So we're here to dive right into our SEC season preview. These are long, 16 teams long. We try to go through and talk about each team just a little bit. So these are kind of long. I do have Hammonds here with me.
If
You guys
if
are
I
with
was
us
not
on Facebook.
if I was not with you, it might be 3 or 4 hours.
If you guys are on Facebook with us tonight, you can help support us by sending stars, or you can subscribe to our Facebook channel now, Facebook page. It's only 99 cents a month, so we would appreciate if you guys will do either one of those. 99 cents a month. All right. There is a huge, huge difference in the SEC this year, John. And we are going to start with that team. That's who we're going to start with. We are starting with Alabama. And there is a huge, huge difference in the SEC this year. There is no Nick Saban at Alabama.
Not at all.
So we got to start with that. So Kellen DeBoer, let's talk about him for just a second before we dive into. So the one thing we know about Kellen DeBoer, he knows offense. So he took over Fresno State in 2020. He was fifth in the nation in passing. All right. In 2021, he was ninth in the nation at Fresno State. Then he went to Washington. In the last 2 years, he's only been number one and number two. So Jalen Milroe's got a guy that knows passing. Now, I ask you, John, does Alabama have the parts?
I think they do, especially offensively. You know, they got Jalen Milroe. I know their offensive line has, not been the best the last couple of years, but they do have pieces, and they bring back three of the main key cogs in that offensive line. Now, Justice Haynes is going to be their star running back. To me, it's going to be all on Jalen Milroe, I think, to make this offense go and make it do what it needs to do.
It all starts with Jalen Milroe. And to be honest with you, I think it's going to end with Jalen Milroe on the offensive side of the ball. Now, one big difference here in this Alabama team and some of the teams that he has coached, that DeBoer has coached, like at Washington. So, there's no O'Dunez, there's no Polk, there's no McMillan. He had 3 top 37 draft picks off, wide receivers on that Washington team. Do you see somebody in the Alabama side here, that's a receiver that can step in and fill some of those roles that O'Dunez, Polk, McMillan was filling the last 2 years?
Well, I mean, they got Kendrick Law. They got Jeremy Bernard, the transfer from Washington, Kobe Prentice. They're talented, but some of them are inexperienced. They did get some more transfers on the defensive side of the ball, but we'll get to that soon. But they're not – the cupboard is not dry. Jalen Milroe is who he is. He's going to use his legs. He's going to use his arm, and his arm even improved last year. Last year, early on in the year, he just wasn't Jalen Milroe. You look at the USF game against South Florida, they looked out of tune early in the year, and the more as the season went on, they started to play better. So it's not like this Alabama team is without talent. It's there. It's just how is Kalen DeBoer going to translate this from the Pac-12 to the SEC? Because the SEC to me is a different animal than the Pac-12. You're jumping into super heavyweights, and I'm interested to see how they do the first couple of games and see how that rolls.
All I'm saying is one thing for sure that we know about Kellen DeBoer is that he runs high octane offenses, and Jalen Milroe is going to have those opportunities. I just look at this roster, and yes, I'm not saying it's Alabama. They have talent, but I'm not sure that they have the O'Dunyas and the Polk and the McMillan type talent 3 deep like Washington's had the last 2 years is all I'm saying.
And I think too, everybody thinks that their running game is just going to be absent. I know that their running game needs to be better, but Kalen DeBoer brings
that's going to start up front, John, with a running game.
It does, and the up front is not being Alabama standards the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, absolutely. The offensive line, they lose Wolford. He's at Kentucky, back at Kentucky. I think he, is a bonus for Kentucky, and I think he done a decent job at Alabama. He's a good recruiter, but we'll see how this translates at the offensive line because they do need to run the ball as well. So, but with that said, we're going to move to the defensive side of the ball here with Bama. And the one thing about Alabama on defense is they're going to have some linebackers.
They are.
I mean, they always do. The Dallas Turners,
Yeah.
They're going to have those backers. They've got a combo defensive coordinator here. Do you think that'll be an issue?
I don't think it will. He's changing his whole staff. Like you said, he's bringing in former South Alabama head coach Kane Womack to call the defense. It's just going to be a new era in Alabama, and it might not be Alabama of Alabama the first season under DeBoer. They're putting a lot of expectations on this coach right off the bat, and I think that's unfair to him. I know that Saban is one of the top coaches in the country. He might be the greatest of all time, but that's unfair to put a lot of this pressure on this coach. I know Alabama comes with expectations, and I know Alabama likes to win, and they have 8 or 9, 10 wins playoff every year, but it's just not fair to me to put that much expectations on this coach because I get these.
Before I move off of defense here, we move on to the keys of the season and stuff. I do want to mention how big is the loss of Caleb Downs?
It's huge
in that backfield.
I think it's really huge because the secondary a year ago wasn't the best, but he kind of made that defense run really good. And losing him is a key cog to that secondary. And, I know they added Keon Sabb. They added some guys in the portal and whatnot. But Alabama's going to have to improve. Now, offensive side of the ball, they're going to be fine. This is where I think they're going to have some issues, because their defense last year was atrocious at times. Just giving up a lot of big plays, a lot of chunk.
And the loss of Caleb Downs is huge. I mean, that dude was a go-getter from the time he first stepped on a field as a true freshman. I mean,
and get this, he went to Ohio State. He went to Ohio State.
No, we'll get to him in a couple of weeks at Ohio State, but losing him hurts on that defensive, especially in that defensive secondary. They also lost Christian Story. We'll get to him maybe a little bit later out of that defensive back secondary. So, but so keys to the season here. We had somebody mention in the comments the running game. I think being able to get that running game going so they can pass the ball like DeBoer and Milroe want, I think is going to be a key.
I think it is. They're not going to be void of talent. That's for sure. And DeBoer's ability, he knows how to create offense, especially with Jalen Milroe going to be there. It's just going to be a different kind of Alabama season, and we'll get into their schedule. But I see maybe 3 losses, maybe 4 on the schedule, because you got games at Wisconsin, at LSU, at Oklahoma, and then you play Georgia at home, which a home game that's about even with Alabama, Georgia.
They expect to win. I mean, I don't care who's
in Tuscaloosa, but there's at least 3 losses on this schedule.
Yep.
If you
go
from
key players, who do you have as a key player? I've got Domani Jackson, cornerback. I think, losing Caleb Downs, I think this guy has got to figure it out and step up.
He does. To me, I feel like it's the run game. The stable of backs that they got. They're going to have to figure out the run game, because they're going to do the pass with Kalen DeBoer, what he did at Washington. It's going to be a new style for Alabama. But I feel like the run game is going to have to get better. But that all, like you said, that all starts with up front and the offensive line, and them being able to get off the ball and do better than they have in the last couple of years. But for me, it's the running backs. I think they have to have a established running game to get the passing going, because if you give Milroe some time, he's going to make plays with his feet. I mean, look at last year, beat Auburn on the last second play. Like he just does things that is just not human, and he just makes plays and just does things
with his arm.
That's what I'm saying. Like and that's not even with his legs. Like he's just good. He's just an overall talented player. And
all right, key game. Who do you think is the key game? I know you kind of mentioned the Wisconsin game already. I mean, for me, and I'll just say this right off the top, I know there's other games on their schedule that should mean a lot, but I think going to Neyland Stadium at Tennessee in a team that they have beaten 15 or 16 times in the last 17 years and had that massive lead and control over them, now that Saban's gone, I feel like that this Tennessee game on the road is going to be a huge tale for the future of not only the Bama, but maybe also at Tennessee as well.
I said Wisconsin, but I think I'm going to change that up. I think it has to be Georgia. And I say this because, it's a brand new year. Kalen DeBoer's coming in. It's a new season. How do you respond that first year against Georgia with a new coach and going into SEC play? I think that's going to be huge for them. Now, is it a winnable game? Yes. Is it a losable game? Yes, because Georgia's going to be right up there with the best of them. But I feel like if you want to get this team, this, monkey off your back, that this coach is not going to do this and this and that, I think you gotta at least win the Georgia game. You gotta go into SEC play and think, we got to take care of business at home, because
Oklahoma game is going to be a big game nationally. Oklahoma versus Alabama. I mean, that's going to be a big game nationally.
Well, that's what I said.
I just think that Tennessee within the SEC is going to be a key point inside the SEC. So to look at their schedule, they start out at home against Western Kentucky University. Then they play USF, South Florida, at Wisconsin, which is the third game of the season that you were talking about. Open date, Georgia at home, at Vandy, South Carolina at home, at Tennessee, October 19th, Missouri at home, which will be another big game, open date at LSU, Mercer at home, at Oklahoma, and then they get Auburn at home to finish off the year.
And Auburn's going to be much improved.
They are. I will agree with that 100%. I mean, not having Texas, not having Ole Miss, there are some teams that Bama is missing here. So, I mean, you look at the schedule at Tennessee, at LSU, at Oklahoma. It's still not easy.
If you think about it, the first part of the early schedule is pretty good. It's that middle to end that's kind of worrisome for me, because
all right, John, Alabama, I got their win total set at 9. What is your record prediction going to be for this Bama team? I think 10-2 is probably going to be in the 12-team playoff. 9-3 is questionable. So
it is.
I said it at 9. Where do you think this Alabama team ends up at the end of the regular season?
I think 10's doable, but man, it's just the end of that schedule. Now they do got a couple of those home games, which will help. I say give me the 9. I don't know. I don't want to put many expectations on what Kalen DeBoer is going to try to do, because that's unfair to him, especially coming in with a Hall of Fame.
In this first year, if he can go 9-3 or 10-2, I think Alabama fans should be pretty happy. They probably won't,
no,
but they should be. That's what I'm going to say.
Unfortunately, they won't be. That's just how the ball crumbles. Because wasn't that a couple of years ago?
Saban I didn't say they would be. I said should be, John.
Now there was a couple of years ago, Saban lost a game, and they was ready to get rid of him. Like, come on now, you're at Alabama and you're ready to get rid of Saban. Like, come on.
All right, we're going to go on to Arkansas and Sam Pittman here. So, I'll start off with you. Do you think that Pittman makes it through the season? Let's put it that way.
Ooh, that's a really, really good question. Since they was 9-4 in 20. It was 9-4 in 21, right?
Yep.
Since that time, they have been like declining big time.
Yep.
And I feel like this season depends on the new OC, Bobby Petrino. I think if the offense can get back to where they need to be, I think they got a chance to be really good. I mean, they got Taylor Green, the quarterback transfer from Boise State. I think he's going to be really good.
He's going to be an absolute monster key for this team, I think, is Taylor Green. Now, I will say this. They got to get back to smash mouth running the ball that Sam Pittman was known for. That's what they did to get to that 9-4 season. And they beat some teams that were expected to be better, but wasn't. Texas was one that year.
Yeah, Texas was one of them, yeah.
Yeah. So, I think running the ball, and then Taylor Green has absolutely got to be on for them. And Bobby Petrino's got to come in and do what he does. And I really don't feel like he did spectacular last year at A&M. I mean, I'm not saying he done terrible, but I don't think he was spectacular. But it was first year.
Well, the thing about Arkansas that most people don't realize is there was just so many turnovers, fumbles, not enough, downfield power. They had special teams problems, not enough plays. They wasn't able to overcome none of this because their old offensive line just made a mess. They wasn't far off though, because 5 of those losses were by a touchdown or less. Like I remember the Alabama game, they was behind, I think 24-10 or something, 21-0, maybe 21-3, and they come back to only lose by 3. Like it wasn't like they was getting blown out. They was just making too many errors and too many mistakes. And it's fixable. I will say that it's fixable, but can Bobby Petrino do it in 1 year and figure it out and, get this offense together? Because
I think for Pittman's sake, he's going to need to. I mean, that's what I think. Defense. Let's talk about Arkansas's defense. 6 of the last 10 games, they gave up 34 more points.
Yeah,
I mean, you're not going to beat too many teams giving up 34 more points.
Well, and they lost their top 2 tacklers, Chris Paul and Jaheim Thomas. Now they did get Xavier Sorey from Georgia, the transfer. But their main guy that's going to lead this defense has to be up front with Landon Jackson. He's the main cog in this defense, and he's going to have to be the one to pull it together, because Arkansas cannot have the year they did a year ago and expect the offense to come through and not give the defense any time either. Like it was a total failure on both sides of the ball. And, we could sit here and talk about Arkansas all day long, defense, offense, special teams, kicking game, whatever. I just think that it's just going to – Pittman's just going to have to reach deep down inside of him and say, you know what? We're going to have to figure this out or I'm out of here. And that's basically what it boils down to.
So my absolute key to the season, fam, is they've got to get their identity back in rushing the football. And losing Rocket Sanders doesn't help.
No, it does not.
I mean, they lose. Not only do they lose him to a conference rival in South Carolina. Yeah. I mean, that doesn't help their running game, and they absolutely have to get back to pounding on the ground and pound. And when Arkansas is at its best, they have backs that can reel off 6-7 yards per carry.
I mean, you look from the past, Darren McFadden, Peyton Hillis, those guys, what they did, that's Arkansas football.
Yep.
And that needs, like you said, that needs to be brought back into their identity, into their standard that we're just going to run you over and just take control of the game. And you've just not seen that under Pittman. And Pittman's known for having a great offensive line. Like he's a great offensive line coach, but it's just not been standard Arkansas football. And I think a lot of that's
they absolutely have to get back to it. Having said all of that, I still think their key player is Taylon Green, quarterback.
Has to be. That's who I said. It's, he might be a difference maker in the run game with his feet.
Yep. All right, key game, John. When you look at their schedule, where do you have as a key game? I'll tell you mine right off the bat. I have mine as at Auburn, September 21st.
I think that's the one, but there's 2. I said Oklahoma State, but I think I'm going to change to Auburn. You got to start winning the SEC again.
Yep.
And that starts this year, because if you don't, Pittman, you're gone.
You got to find a couple of wins in the SEC, Pittman. I know that the SEC is tough, and I know you're trying to climb out, but you've got to beat Oklahoma State and find a couple of wins to get to your 6.
Well, see, the Oklahoma State game is a non-con game, and you can afford to lose that game. I mean, you beat Arkansas Pine Bluff, that's one thing. You can lose the non-con, you be 1-1, but their struggles have been in the SEC department, and they have to at least. I'm not saying get out here and win go 6-2 in the SEC, go 5-1, but win a couple games in the SEC. Get the fan base back on your back, because if you don't, like I said, Pittman's probably gone.
Yep. So let's take a look at their schedule. They start off August 31st with Arkansas Pine Bluff. Then they go at Oklahoma State. They're home against UAB, at Auburn, in Arlington, Texas A&M. And then home with Tennessee, open date, LSU at home, Mississippi State, Ole Miss at home, open date, Texas at home, Louisiana Tech at home, and then they end at Missouri. So that's a quick look at their schedule. They miss Alabama and Georgia and Oklahoma,
but
so,
I will say their schedule is still pretty tough.
It is. But just looking at their schedule real quick, I have their win total set at 6. Are they over or under? And where do you think they wind up?
I would agree with you, but I just have not seen any improvement. Now, does that mean to say that it's going to get any better this year? It can. But there's just been no changes. There's been no desire the last couple of years. And until you see it on the field, I just don't see them going to a bowl game. I said it at 6, but I'm going to be honest with you. I think 5 and 7 is likely. And if they do, I don't think Pittman will make it out of December. I'm not sure if he makes it to the end or not, but I don't think he'll make it out of December as the head coach. I think they're going to have to win games. Well, I would say not win games. They're going to have to win some games that they're not exactly supposed to win. And that starts with Auburn and a couple of those games that are coming up in the early part of the schedule.
Yep. Oklahoma State's going to be a big one for them as well.
I agree with you.
That definitely is going to be a big one for them as well. All right. We are going to move on to the Auburn Tigers.
Oh, my favorite. This is my favorite interview. This is my favorite discussion right here, because this is my team as a sleeper.
Okay, so we're moving on to the Auburn Tigers here in 2024. This is Hugh Freeze's second year. He did make a bowl game with them last year at 6-6 and lost. So they went 6-7. They are kind of being picked as a sleeper, 8-4, 9-3 team here. But here's what I want to say. Looking at the way he's recruiting, again, just like he did at Ole Miss, you better get him now. You better get him this season if you're going to.
You ought to.
That's all I'm going to say. And Kentucky's on the schedule. So if you're gonna beat them, you better get them this year.
Well, and last year their offense at times it played fast, but it was just, I wouldn't say it was horrible. There was just not a lot to be desired. Now, I will say this: Auburn brings in a brand new receiving corps, and they might have, next to Ole Miss and maybe Texas, they might have one of the best skill positions, like on the offensive side.
Biggest question here on offense is Peyton Thorne.
That's the key. Like
and why Hugh Freeze didn't go after a transfer quarterback, and that's been the biggest talk here with Auburn all off season long, even as far back as spring ball. So that's the biggest sticking point here for Auburn. Can Peyton Thorne run the offense that Hugh Freeze wants to? I mean, Auburn was close last year, and then they ended the season with a terrible loss to New Mexico State at home. And then they had the Jalen Milroe miracle and then lost the bowl game. So that's how they ended the season.
They just collapsed down the stretch.
Yeah.
Name to watch for me offensively is Cam Coleman. If you don't know him now, you're going to figure him out pretty quick. 5-star talent, really great player. Robert Lewis, the transfer from Georgia State. I think it's Georgia State, maybe Georgia Southern something.
It is. It's Georgia State.
Georgia State. They got the Lambert Smith from Penn State. Hunter's back on the offensive side. They got Fairweather from Florida International, the tight end. This might be Auburn's best offense that they've had in 3 or 4 years, skill position wise.
Oh, I agree with you 100%.
But the key question, like you said, is can Peyton Thorne prove the doubters wrong and figure it out and get it to these guys? That's the big question mark.
All right. On defense, he brings back in DJ Durkin. It's his guy. Been with him before. And Durkin's been a good defensive coordinator. Now, he was a former head coach at Maryland. He's been at Texas A&M as defensive coordinator. And he brings back DJ Durkin as the coordinator here. Is that, he's also brought in a couple of other guys that were his guys. Last year, he didn't have all of his guys with him. And I think that's going to make a difference here for Auburn this year as well.
I do. This group, to me, needs to get more pressure up front. And another thing, they got to be better against the run. It was really bad last year. But here's the thing that got me is they wasn't great against the run, but they was great on third downs. They have
a young group of linebackers.
Eugene Asante.
I think they're going to need a little growing up throughout the season, which doesn't always bode well. But when you look at their schedule, and we'll do that in a minute, they could start out 4-0. I mean, it's possible. So that does bode well for growing up a little bit, like I was just talking about. They need some new corners to shine on this defense. I think offensively they have a lot of weapons. Defensively, I think there's some youngness here that they're going to have to, kind of rise up and overcome.
I do. I just, they brought back Eugene Asante. To me, he's one of the best linebackers in the country, and even in the SEC. My key player, since we're at that, I think it's Trio Carter. They need the tackles to be they need them to step up, and it begins with them up front.
That's actually who I have. That's who I have.
I didn't even know. So
yeah, I know.
I guess
that's actually who I have is Trio Carter.
I think it's huge because you lose Justin Rogers, you lost some guys on the line. You're going to need these guys to step up and create some pressure.
Keys to the season for me is they are 2-5 when they gave up 200 or more passing yards. And I talked about those young cornerbacks and stuff and young linebackers. I think defensively this team's got some growing up to do, and I think that's going to be important. for them to have the kind of season that they are hoping for, because a lot of fans are hoping for an 8-4, 9-3 season here. In for Auburn here at Jordan-Hare this year. So, all right, key game. When you look at their schedule, who do you think is their key game? I'll tell you mine right off the bat. I have at home against Oklahoma.
What's up, Bill?
And
Oklahoma.
the reason why I say that is I think it's possible that Auburn could be 4-0 going into that game. It's at Jordan-Hare, and they get Oklahoma Sooners coming to Jordan-Hare. I mean, I think this could be a huge, huge game, and if they could get this win, signature win with Hugh Freeze right off the bat, I think that could be huge for them this season.
I think it could be. The Oklahoma game's really huge, I think, because you come into that game 4-0, and there's an opportunity there for the fans to get behind them and really see Auburn as maybe as a team to watch in the SEC. And I think, that game starts it. And I think that game is huge for not only winning, but I think it's huge for recruiting as well.
All right, so let's take a dive and look at their schedule real quick. They start off with Alabama A&M and Cal at home, New Mexico at home, Arkansas at home. So they get the Oklahoma game at home. They start off with 5 straight home games. Then they go at Georgia, open date, at Missouri, at Kentucky, Vandy at home, open date, Louisiana Monroe, Texas A&M at home, and at Alabama is how they end the season.
I got the over and under at 8. I think the Oklahoma game.
I think they're at 7.5 or 8 for their over and under.
I think the Oklahoma game is the key game.
It absolutely is. I mean,
because either you win that game, you either win that game or you lose that game, and it's flip flop. Your season either gets better or you kind of have a little streak there where you kind of flop out.
Yeah, man, I agree with you. I think this Auburn team could easily be an 8-4 team, and that's kind of where I have them is being an 8-4 team this year. And if they can do that, I think that'll be a huge step in the right direction for this Auburn team. All right, we're going to move on to the Florida Gators. I mean, the first thing we're going to talk about, John, with Florida is Billy Napier.
Billy Bob.
I mean, it's Billy Napier. I mean, you know what? Here's another one. Do you think he makes it through the season? They have a very tough schedule.
That's a good question.
And we will get to that. But
that's a really good question. Now, I will say this. A lot of people didn't think that Graham Mertz would have the kind of season that he did a year ago, but he wasn't the problem. Let's put it out there.
No, but I mean, they lost Princeton, they lost Farmer, they lost NTM. I mean, you know, they lost quite a bit in the transfer portal as well. This Florida team,
and
which is strange, thinking that these top talents are leaving Florida to go somewhere else. But it's true. I mean, they actually did. So, you know, looking at their offensive line has got to improve. Excuse me.
Injuries happen. Injuries happen. but
They had
they've
a
been a
great
huge,
running game, but now Johnson is hurt, so I'm not sure. Maybe you know more information. Is he out for the year, or is he coming back?
I haven't really heard. I do know that they got Treon Webb. He was, I think, the third leading rusher from a year ago. And they got Jaden Ball. He should be in the rotation. So it's not like but they do lose a lot in Montreal Johnson. He led the Gators last year. I think he had 5 touchdowns last year. Graham Mertz wasn't, dynamic, but he was serviceable. He made plays even when the offensive line was terrible. There was a couple of games where he looked really bad, but he'll spread the ball around. He just needs more time, like you said, from that offensive line. And I think they're going to have some help. They got Eugene Wilson. They got the Dyke kid, Shamir Dyke from Wisconsin. They got Elijah Badger from Arizona State. They're going to be fine offensively. I just think they're just going to have to get this offensive line straight and get it figured out, because if they don't get it figured out, it's going to be the same problems that they had a year ago. And if that happens, then Billy Napier's probably gone.
Let's talk about their defense, John. They have to be far stronger than they were last year.
I remember a time when Florida defense, when you talked about them, like on these preseason shows and picks, that was their main strength of their football team. Their run defense a year ago was not good at all.
Well, that's my key to their season is run defense. Since you brought it up, that's my key to the season.
I feel like the secondary needs to be better too. There was a lot of.
I feel like their linebackers and the secondary is probably a little better. Here's my deal with Florida. I think their 22 is still as talented as they've always been. I think it's their backups. They don't have quite as much talent after 22.
But there's a lot of they do have some depth this year that they didn't have a year ago. And for me, my key player is Jason Marshall. He might be their best defensive player. Last year he broke up 18 passes. Well, actually in the last 2 years. So he's their main cog in their secondary. And I think he's going to be a big thing for them. But like I said, their main key for the year is their run defense. There was a time back in the day when the Florida run defense, you couldn't run on them.
Yep.
My
key player is actually a San Diego State transfer. And I think he's going to fill up one of the tackle spots on that offensive line, Brandon Dickinson Crenshaw. Yeah. I think he's going to be a key player for them. And it's really odd to sit here and tell you that a key player for the Florida Gators is a San Diego State Aztec transfer.
My other one would have to be Elijah Badger. I think, he comes in, I think he was averaging over 15 yards per catch a year ago for Arizona State. I think he'll kind of fill the role that Ricky Pearsall left, which is a big loss for Florida, honestly. But I think adding Dyke and Badger will be real big to get the ball to those playmakers. But it just all starts with the offensive line. If you don't have an offensive line, you're not going to win many games in the SEC. In college football, and especially the SEC, you're just not going to win.
All right, key game, John. I'm calling it right off the bat. Game 1 at home against Miami. I know it's a non-conference game, but when you look at their schedule, like Billy Napier, the way they lost, I think they lost like 5 in a row at the end of the year last year. Billy Napier needs this home win at Ben Griffin Stadium.
I agree. I think it's Miami. I don't think beating them is going to just be like, the Gators are back. But, man, would that feel good to win that home game early in the year? There's a
I
lot.
think it will give them a little bounce for the season if they can win that game. So I'm calling that their key game. Looking at the schedule, they start off with Miami, Samford at home, Texas A&M at home. So they get 3 home games. At Mississippi State, winnable game.
Mm-hmm.
Open date. Then they play at home against UCF.
Which is another tough game.
At Tennessee, Kentucky at home.
Which they lost two
Then
years
the
in a row.
Georgia game in Jacksonville.
3 years.
You get the Georgia game in Jacksonville, at Texas, LSU at home, Ole Miss at home, and at Florida State is how they end the year. That schedule, they play 11 power conference schools, guys.
The thing about the schedule is they got to win the Miami game. Because if you win the Miami game, you're pretty much solid to beat.
You can win the Miami game and beat Samford at home and then go to Mississippi State and get a win. Even if you lose to Texas A&M
you're 3-1
home, you're 3-1 in the first 4 games, and you've got some breathing room after that. Then you got an open date, and then play UCF at Tennessee and Kentucky. So
I think, to me, the over and under, I hate to do it, Florida fans, but I'm going to.
I got 5.5.
I got 6.
What my over
I think there's going to be somewhere in there they're going to win a game they're not supposed to. And it could be Kentucky. It could be Miami. It could be Tennessee, since Tennessee has not been able to beat them in that series. It's been tough. Florida kind of owns that series. So I think it starts with Miami. I think they got to win that game.
That start is going to be key. So, like I said, for Florida there, I think that, getting out early and having a 3-1, start is going to be key. And the only way to do that is they have to win at home against Miami, in my opinion.
Yep. That is the key game.
All right. Then we're going to get to Georgia, guys. The Georgia Bulldogs. 42-2 the last 3 years.
It's impressive.
Wait a second. I don't think y'all heard me. They are 42-2 the last 3 years. Wow. That's all I have to say. And the 2 losses were to Saban and Alabama. They've lost to nobody else. So there is no coach, no team that has beat them, or no coach that has beat them currently coaching in the last 3 years.
You want to know an impressive stat to me? Since we're going out talking offense, they ended the season 5th in the country in total and scoring offense, right? They was 5th in passing efficiency. They was number 1 in the nation in third down conversions. Number 2, but I think they was number 2 behind Oregon in first downs. And they was first in the SEC and 9th in time of possession. Now
I agree with you a little bit, Bill, on that.
Was they perfect last year? No. There was games where they didn't look that great. Auburn was one. The Alabama game was one. Missouri was another. When I look at this group offensively this year, I think it's going to be more effective. I think they'll put more games away this year because of the offense. Even though they outscored teams a year ago, pretty
Here's
high.
my question about the offense, John. They lost Ladd McConkey. They lost Bowers. I mean, I know they went out and got the Vanderbilt transfer. And, wide receiver, and he's got talent. I'm not going to say he doesn't, but Bowers and McConkey, they're first rounders or high second rounders.
Oh, I totally agree with you. But I think too, you're not. See, here's the thing: you're not going to replace Bowers, But there's a name that everybody needs to know, and his name's Oscar Delp. He will be there. Dominic Lovett will be there. They got Dylan Bell back, which they ended up losing Rara Thomas because of some issues going on that he got kicked off the team. I think was it a week or so ago. Kobe Young, the Miami transfer, is going to be great for them. So they're going to be a really good offense. This offense, to me, might be better than they was a year ago. And for a lot of
that's going to start up front too, John. They have 4 what will probably be NFL starters back.
Yeah, like
on that offensive line.
4 starters, and the depth that they got is absolutely insane to me. The offensive line is going to be back. They're going to be just nasty up front. They got Ernest Green, Xavier Trust, Dylan Fairchild's back, Tate Rutledge is back, Jared Wilson. I think he's stepping in for Cedric Van
Pran is going to be the center.
So the depth is there. The offensive line is there. And that's scary for teams knowing that this offense might be better than it was a year ago.
And we ain't even brought up Trevor.
And we're not even talking about the defense yet.
I mean, Trevor Etienne, you can talk about offense here, and you got Beck. So maybe they don't need a Bowers. I don't know. Maybe they don't need a Lad McConkey. But I'm just telling you, I mean, if I was to be nitpicky, those 2 losses you would think would affect most teams. It would affect Georgia. I'm not sure that it will.
Not as much.
All right, let's get to the defense.
Michael Williams.
Absolutely. Kentucky was all over him, and I wanted him so bad. But when Georgia comes calling, it's hard to pull the kid. So, but he is defensive lineman up front, man. I mean, he's a monster up front. That's where the defense is going to start here. Mm-hmm. They're going to have, again, even though they lost Dumas Johnson to Kentucky, mm-hmm. they're going to have one of the best linebacker crews in the conference.
That's not even talking about the front 4. Nazir Stackhouse,
nasty.
Nazir Stackhouse. They got Warren Brinson, and their rotation is so deep. Like now, it's pretty young, but it's deep. But the guys that they're going to switch in and out, like and CJ Allen. That's not even talking about CJ Allen and the linebacker crew.
Like the linebackers, I'm telling you, are loaded.
Jalen Walker, Chaz Chambliss, Small Mondon.
The only possible, and I mean smidget possible weakness on this defense is going to be the secondary. You might be able to find a space in the secondary that you could attempt to pick on. And I said attempt.
I think losing Nyman Green hurt him a little bit. He went to Purdue. I think that hurts him a little bit. Lassiter left. Now they did bring back Humphrey and Everett. Now they'll probably use the freshman Ellis Robinson a lot. He should be a really good coverage guy. Now Malachi Starks might be the best guy in the secondary safety. He might be the best safety in the country. Let's just not. That's not even counting the SEC. Like let's just let's just leave it at that. Like from their offense to their defense to their special teams, and let's not get started on Georgia's kicking game because their kicking game has always been good. Their kicking game is going to be as good this year. They got a great kicker.
All right, so my key to the season here for them is, and my one thing that I didn't think they did real well last year. I know they went undefeated and lost in the SEC championship game, but their pass rush wasn't spectacular.
It wasn't.
Defensively, they were awesome. I'm not going to say, but they didn't have quite the pass rush that they have been having, with Carter.
Auburn gave him fit. Auburn gave him fits last year.
Yeah. So if I had to pick anything that I think they need to improve on, that would be it.
Mm-hmm.
Key player. Who do you have for a key player for Georgia?
I think it starts with Carson Beck. I know the offensive line is going to be back. They returned 4 starters, but I mean, the defense is going to do what they do. I think there's some real questions, back in the secondary a little bit. But I think if they want to have another big year, I think, I'm not saying he's the greatest quarterback, but he's just a game manager. He knows how to, he knows how to handle the pressure. And
it's possible he could be the number 1 pick in the draft, and he could definitely be a Heisman candidate because they're going to win a lot of games.
And I don't even think he's that great of a quarterback. I'm not saying he's great. What I'm saying, he's just a guy that just goes out there and gets things done.
I'm going to give you a name that nobody else is going to give you here. He's a wide receiver that transferred from Miami. Colby Young.
Colby Young. Yep.
Colby Young is his name. He is a senior wide receiver. Last 2 years at Miami, he has 79 catches, 930 yards, and 10 touchdowns. And when you're replacing Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey, like I talked about here when we first started talking, I think a guy like him could be key in that passing game for Beck. I know you have Delp at the tight end and a few other options there as well. But look for Colby Young to be a new name at Georgia that you hadn't heard of yet.
Michael Williams.
Well, I've heard of him.
I'm just saying. My key game is Texas. I'm just going to go ahead and put it out there. I think if you win that game, you're pretty much. Well, I wouldn't say destined to go to the SEC championship, but because you got to get through Alabama. But you mark off one of the top games that you need to do to get there, and I think that's really a big game in my opinion this early in the season.
I'm gonna put a road game a little bit later in the season here. I'm going at Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss is going to be one of the top teams in the SEC this year. I think it's Lane Kiffin's turn here, and it should be. Let's see if he gets there. We'll get to them a little bit later. But this game in Oxford on November the 9th, and I know they play at Alabama as well. So, I mean, they've got some big games here.
Mm-hmm.
That you can pick from. All right. They start out neutral site Clemson, Texas Tech at home at Kentucky, open date at Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State at home at Texas, open date Florida and Jacksonville, at Ole Miss, Tennessee at home, UMass at home, and Georgia Tech at home is how they end the season.
I got to say 11. Like, if you're going to be a title contender and SEC championship contender, you got to
Well, I have their over-under set at 10.5, but 11 is where I expect them to be.
That's where I got them. I mean, there might be a
Now,
slip
they've
up.
been undefeated the last couple of seasons in the regular season and everything. So, I mean, they haven't lost any regular season games. So if they drop one, it's a pretty big deal because they haven't been doing that.
And the thing about Georgia, though, that really concerns me, though, is in some of these games, they just last year they never put teams away, and that concerns me on certain games on this schedule because it gets a little tougher, and you know.
All right, John, we're getting to Kentucky.
This should be good.
So, all right, we're doing this in alphabetical order, guys, just in case you guys are wondering. We are at Kentucky. I mean, I'm going to start out with the polls come out yesterday, and they had Kentucky 37th in the coaches poll.
They did.
Does that seem even a little bit low to you? Because it does to me. But
I do. I think
I'm going to be honest with you, John, right off the bat. It's time that you have to start winning some against some of the good teams.
Yeah, you got to win games against the. I wouldn't say you got to beat Georgia
Even
every
500
year
or above, but you've got to win games against the good teams.
You do.
So that's where I'm going to start out with Kentucky on offense. Again, John, a whole lot of new when it comes to the coaching. So we've got a new offensive coordinator. You got a new offensive line coach. You've got a new wide receiver coach. You've got a new quarterback.
Got a new running back.
You got a new running back again. So there's a whole lot of new here on the offensive side of the ball. Of course, you bring in former 5-star Georgia quarterback Brock Vandagriff. He's probably going to be the starter. Gavin Wimsatt might be a change of pace Wildcat guy that comes in from Rutgers. But weapons on the outside, there's a lot back. But there's also a whole lot of new here for Kentucky.
There is. You get the running back from Ohio State, DeMonte Traynham. I think he's going to be a workhorse type back. But last year for me, it was the line. They didn't do enough to get the running game going. Now, it was great in pass protection, and they were really good at keeping the negative plays to a minimum than they'd had the year before. But it's going to have to be better in the run game. They do bring back Eli Cox. I think he's one of the best centers. Marquise Cox is a tackle. Getting Gerald Mincey from Tennessee really was a big deal, I thought.
It is for that
especially at the tackle spot. But like you said, this might be one of the fastest offenses in college football, maybe even the SEC. Dane Key, Berrien Brown. They got Jamori Macklin from
now if we can just play fast. Lord have
North Texas. Wasn't he from North Texas?
Yeah. Missouri and then North Texas.
He went to Missouri, then North Texas. So I think, you're going to get a different kind of style of offense. If you can get the RPO and the run game back to where Kentucky needs to have it, I think this could be a really fun team to watch.
So offense, they got a lot of weapons. I agree with you. The offensive line is going to be an absolute key here. They absolutely have to pick up the pace.
Yeah, it was slow.
The last 2 years has been pitiful. I mean, just pitiful to watch on the offensive side of the ball. They were lucky if they snapped the ball 52, 53 times a game last year.
That was really slow.
And a lot of these teams are snapping 70 to 80 a game. So they just don't get enough offensive plays. That is an absolute key for this offense. Now, defense. John, a lot of people are sleeping on this Kentucky defense.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. They are.
I'm going to tell y'all right now, this Kentucky defense has all the pieces to be legit.
They do. Could be even better than the 2019 team.
I'm telling y'all right now, this Kentucky defense has all the pieces to be legit. Deion Walker, he could be the best defensive player in the nation.
That's not even counting Maxwell Harrison in the secondary. They bring back Jordan Lovett.
I know
that. Keyshawn Silver returns. Now they lost Josiah Hayes to an injury early this offseason, but they still got depth at the D-line positions. Like they might have 3 or 4 of the top 100 players in the country at linebacker, secondary, and D-line. Deion Walker.
All 3 levels.
Safari, De'Aaron Jackson. Then they got the Jamin Dumas Johnson from Georgia.
Their linebackers are going to be J.J. Weaver, De'Aaron Jackson, and Jamin Dumas Johnson from Georgia, who in 2022 was an All-American, second-team All-American. So I'm just telling – and that was on a 2022 national championship Georgia team with 80-some tackles and was an All-American.
Well,
if you guys don't know, I'm telling you that this Kentucky defense, and before I leave, this Kentucky defense has got some 4-star freshmen that are going to come in on third down packages. Smith twins and Robinson. Y'all remember their name because they're coming after your ass. That's all I'm going to say.
Yep.
Just telling you.
The biggest transfer in, since we're going that direction, would be Jamin Dumas Johnson. He played right away as a freshman at Georgia. He was banged up a lot last year, missed a lot of the seasons. I'm going to say this. Don't be shocked. Now, don't be shocked if he leads this team in tackles this year. Just be prepared.
Who's that? Dumas Johnson?
Yeah.
Oh, no, Dumas Johnson probably will. I think he probably will lead this team.
He'll probably lead them in tackles.
J.J. Weaver had 7.5 sacks last year. Look for him to continue that kind of stuff. Alex Afari is probably moving to linebacker here. I'm telling you guys, this defense is legit. Has all the pieces to be legit. I'm talking
it has. I've said it since
top 3 defense in the SEC.
I've said it since probably early May. This defense has a really good chance to be top 3 in the SEC. And that's not a –
Having said that, my keys to the season here is stopping the run.
They did a good job last year.
And they got to continue that. And now, they did at times, but against the top teams, they kind of struggled. Against the top teams.
Yeah.
Now, that's my keys for the season here. So key player, I know you probably already said yours with Dumas Johnson. My key player is going to be Brock Vandegrift.
I think he's huge. That's another one. So
my key player here is going to be Brock Vandegrift. I think the defense is going to be legit. I really do. There's a whole lot of new on this offense, and they are going to need Vandegrift to lead this offense.
If they give Vandegrift time, if the offensive line can improve in pass protection, which they was good last year. It was the run run plays that they struggle with. But if they can stay upright and figure out how to keep their man not from falling on the ground, I think there's going to be a massive, massive change in this offensive identity. And my key game,
game.
Man, I want to say Georgia, but it's not. It's South Carolina. And I say this to say this. Because you beat Southern Miss, you're 1-0, right? Well, you lose to South Carolina, you're 1-1, right? Well, then you're 1-1 going again to the game against Georgia. And there's where it could turn sideways.
Listen, the South Carolina game, as far as I'm concerned, it's an absolute win. And if you can't win that, then the season, you might as well just mark it up right there because
chalk the season up. Like you gotta
win. You have to win that game. I'm sorry, you have to win that game.
You have to. Like it's just it's there, and you lose that game, and then you lose the Georgia game. You're 1-2, and now you're starting to think for yourself, and you're thinking, what do I have to do to get back in good graces? And
well, my key game here, it is a home game. And I think that Kentucky absolutely has to start winning against good teams, like I said to start with. And my key game is at home against Auburn.
Yeah, that's another one.
That's my key game. This Auburn team is going to be pretty good. We already covered them. I think they can have a very good chance of being an 8-4 team, being at least 4-4 in the SEC at the very least. And having said that, this is the year that you have to get Hugh Freeze if you're going to get him, and they come to your house.
Yeah.
So you have got to win, circle this game to take down the Auburn Tigers.
Yeah.
So with that said, I'm going to take a quick look at their schedule. Southern Miss and South Carolina and Georgia are all three home games to start the season out. 4, actually. Ohio is the 4th game. And then at Ole Miss, open date, Vandy at home. At Florida, which is another big game, being in the swamp. At home against Auburn. At Tennessee, open date, Murray State at home, at Texas, and Louisville at home.
Yeah. Which Louisville will be much improved this year too.
Yeah. That is what the schedule looks like. I have their over and under. I said it. I know that a lot of the bettings, FanDuel and everything have it at 6.5.
I got it at 7.
I got it at 7. That's what I got it.
I mean, you're going to have – see, the reason I say the South Carolina game, Brad, is because you lose that game, you're 1-2, and then you beat Ohio, you're 2-2. Or no, wait a minute. You lose to Georgia, you're 1-2. You beat Ohio, you're 2-2. And then you go to Ole Miss and lose, you're 2-3. In the middle of the schedule that could get really dicey. And
I agree with you. All the home games are dire. I mean, you have to win these home games outside of Georgia. I'm not going to blow everybody's mind here and tell everybody that Kentucky's beating Georgia. But outside of Georgia, they got to win these home games.
They do. I agree with you.
They're huge.
They're must-win games.
Yeah, so don't go be telling people that I blew everybody's mind
and said that it was going to beat Georgia.
Said something about beating Georgia at home, because that's not what I said. Not at all.
Not at all.
All right, LSU. Can LSU get to that 10th win, or are they stuck on 9 with Brian Kelly?
Man, I'm going to be honest with you. The defense is going to have to be better, especially on the back end. The secondary was really, really tough to watch. They're going to have to stop the run. Can they figure it out? They've gave up 2,000 yards rushing in each of the last
In
2 years.
back-to-back years. Yep. First time possibly ever. I know that I done a little looking and back through the 90s, and I never seen that before.
And this is a team that has been known for getting elite guys at the playmaking position, in the linebacker position and cornerback position. It's been atrocious, and until that improves, it's not going to get any better. Like, now, they do bring back Jacoby and Gorey, Jalen Lee, Savion Jones, and they got some guys in the transfer portal. But you're going to have to figure out how to stop the run. But
well, let's talk about the offense for just a minute.
But yeah, moving to the offense.
So Grant Nussmeyer.
Yeah, he's an unknown to a lot of people.
Where,
but probably
where are you at with him? Because I have seen people say that he's going to be at the top of the list for the SEC, and I've seen people say that he's unproven. So,
well, I mean, he's probably unproven to other people, but he's probably not unproven to LSU because they know what they're getting with him. You know, he saw some time over the last 3 years, and I know they got.
I don't think they get 7,000. I don't think they get 7,000 yards on offense this year. I'm just saying.
I will say that they got a really good, decent receiving core. You know, they bring back Mason Taylor at the tight end position. I think Chris Hilton is back. They got the transfer out of Liberty, CJ Daniels. You know, he's not going to be Jaden Daniels. He's just not. You know,
I say it. They're not going to have 7,000. Did you hear me? 7,000 offensive yards last year.
I think where their strong suit this year, to me, is up front. You know, this might be their biggest strength. You know, they got the top he's probably going to go NFL. Will Campbell, he'll be off the board next year. Emory Jones is a top NFL prospect. You know, they have DJ Chester. I think he plays at center. Miles Frazier is at the guard spot. So they're going to be fine up front. And like I said, it's not going to be all about Jaden Daniels and what he did. It's a new year, new team. But they got enough weapons offensively to do some damage in the SEC. But like I said, it's just going to be about the defense. How does the defense manage to stop the run and figure things out? Because a year ago it was just really
can't give up 2,000 yards rushing.
You just can't. And especially not in SEC play, because teams are just not. They're going to blow you out every single night, and they made up for that last year with their offense. I'm
going to say this: despite them giving up 2,000 yards in back-to-back seasons, size up front on the defensive line is not an issue.
It's not. It's not. Which, I mean, they bring back Harold Perkins.
So what is the issue? Like, they're huge, they're big, they're fast. Is it just scheme? Was it Matt House? Because they brought in a new coordinator and got rid of Matt House.
It has to be, because there was times last year I was watching the LSU games, and Harold Perkins was just plumb out of position at times. Like, he just did not. I wouldn't say he didn't know where to go.
I mean, he was overplaying. He was all over the field, so he was overplaying stuff.
Yeah, and last year's pass defense was probably I think it was the second worst in the ACC. Now they do get Major Burns, Sage Ryan, Jordan Gilbert. He comes in from Texas A&M. I think he'll help out up there. Now, PJ Woodland's a freshman. I expect him to be a big factor right away.
So here's my key. My key to the season: stop the run.
Yeah, it has to be the main thing. Like, you gotta.
I mean, it's that simple. Stop the run. All right. So key player.
I think
Who
it's
you have?
Musmire. I think it's
Nussmeier?
Musmire.
Yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't say that he's going to be
No
Jaden
pressure.
Daniels.
No pressure to be Jaden Daniels or nothing. I mean,
I'm not saying that he has to be great.
I'm just messing. Me.
But he has to be good.
You don't have
if
to live
LSU
up to the Heisman or nothing. I'm just saying.
No, like he does not have to be that. Like everybody's thinking like he has to come in and be great, but he has to be good if LSU wants to get to the college football playoff. Like he's got to be on. Is what I'm saying. He has to be on games. Like you can't have these.
So key game, John, and I'm going to give you a quick little stat here, and this is the reason why I have chosen this as the key game. My key game is in Las Vegas, September 1st against USC. It is the first game of the year, and yes, I am fully aware that they have a whole SEC slate to play. Here's why it is the key game for the year. Okay.
I know exactly why, because three of
the last two years they have opened the season with Florida State as a loss with Brian Kelly. Okay.
They lost to UCLA too.
The year before that, they opened the season with a loss to UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
The year before that, in 2020, they opened the season to Mississippi State in a loss.
Got cooked at home.
Yes. Okay. So I'm here to tell you guys that LSU has not won the opening game since 2019 when they had that killer team and won the title.
Joe Burrow. Yep.
So that's why I said their key game is they got to get off the snide here, to start the season out. And they're playing USC in Vegas.
Yep.
Now, I'm aware they have a whole slate of SEC games, and there's a lot of key games that you can pick and choose from there. But that's why I picked that game. All right. USC in Vegas, home against Nichols, at South Carolina, home against UCLA, South Alabama open date, Ole Miss at home, Arkansas away, Texas A&M away, open date, Alabama at Florida, Vandy, and Oklahoma at home is how they end their season this year.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I think it's the early season game against USC.
I just looked at it and like, man, how have they lost that many, first games of the year in a row? I mean, come on now.
Now, I will say this while we're on this subject. They brought in former DC Blake Baker from Missouri. So I think that's going to help a little bit. Matt House was, I don't know what happened to Matt House.
All right. They've been stuck at 9 wins. They need that one extra win to be 10-2 to get in the playoffs to make sure. Probably, I got it set at 9. I got their season set at 9.5.
I think it's 9.
So you think they're stuck on 9?
Yeah, I think they get 9.
Okay. I mean, that's fair. We're gonna call Brian Kelly the 9 guy. All right, Mississippi State. What you got on Mississippi State here? So with Mississippi State, they got Jeff Levy. The first thing that I want to talk about is that with Mississippi State, they went back to offense.
All right.
If you go back to the Dan Mullen days, they were great in offense. Then they had Mike Leach. There was an offensive mind. And they went back with Jeff Levy as an offensive-minded guy. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of bode well for Mississippi State over the last 10 years. You know, you go back to Dan Mullen with Dak Prescott and stuff. And then, like I said, Leach with Rodgers.
They went from air raid to just running. They took away what strengths that Will Rogers had, and he wasn't even the same quarterback last year.
And Levy was the star offensive coordinator for that Oklahoma team, and Dylan Gabriel and all that they did. He also was with Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss before that. So, I mean,
I just think it's going to take time to instill a winning culture and establish success here.
Now, I do too. I mean, their offensive line, I think they lost everybody on the offensive line.
It's going to be a struggle this year.
The cupboard was bare. I'm just saying, in the long run, I think them going after an offensive-minded guy is where they have had some success over the last 10 or 12 years.
They have. I mean, you look at Mike Leach, what he did with them in the air raid offense. He changed that whole offense around, and they won some games and put up some numbers.
So defense. Zach Arnett has not been bad on the defensive side of the ball.
No, he's gone.
You know, so they defense is not going to be their Achilles heel, I don't think, here.
Mm-mm.
The linebackers should be pretty good.
The problem they're going to have, though, is like veteran leadership. You know, they don't have a lot of starters from a year ago.
No, they lost their coach, a lot of transfers.
Now, they do bring back Corey Ellington. I think he'll be their best return player. You know, they got the –
I think the key is going to be adjustments on the offensive side of the ball.
I think it is.
How quick does Levy get some adjustments made throughout the season here that is working in a good direction and for Mississippi State to move the football?
It was impossible to watch a year ago, you know. They failed to get 200 yards passing 8 times. Like Will Rogers was not the same quarterback.
So key player has got to be Blake Shapen.
He's one of them, but I think mine will have to be Ethan Miner, the center. I think he'll rebuild a lot of this offensive line that Mississippi State needs. The guys that they lost, I think he'll be a big piece for them.
Blake Shapen had 5,600 yards, 36 touchdowns in 3 seasons. He's got to come in and run some kind of an offense here for Levy for this team to have any chance to win some games, to be quite honest.
And you said my key game, I got to go Florida. Like, I wouldn't say that it's not just another game. It's a big deal for Levy to get off the ground in a rebuilding year. You get what I'm saying? Like, because after this, you go at Texas, at Georgia, and then you play a home game against A&M. Now, that could be a rough start if you lose to get to Florida. Like, and have they not played Florida here? You know, I think it's since 2010, I think. Was it Dak Prescott played? I think was Dak. No, I don't think. I can't remember, but this is a key game for Mississippi State, in my opinion. They need to win this game.
Well, it's an early game, and I'm going to be honest with you. They're not going to have a chance to win too many SEC games. Mm-mm. This game at home is going to be one of them that they're going to have a –
they got Eastern Kentucky, UMass, and then they have the 50-50
games. They're not going to have too many chances to win SEC games.
There's not a lot to win there. No. Now, I will say that the 2 toss-ups for me would be Arkansas and Florida.
Yeah.
If you're
I
going,
said there's not going to be too many, and that Florida game at home early is going to be a key one. So they start out with Eastern Kentucky. At Arizona State is also going to be a key game for them as well.
Which Arizona State's going to be.
Arizona State started as a new coach and lost a lot too. So, you know, that's a key game. Toledo at home. Sorry. Toledo at home, Florida at home, at Texas, open date, at Georgia, Texas A&M, Arkansas at home, UMass at home, at Tennessee, open date, Missouri at home, and at Ole Miss.
Right, bro. Yeah. I think the Arkansas and the Florida game is the key games. Like, if you want to go to a bowl game, those are the two games you got to win. And then you got to beat Toledo, possibly.
That Toledo game won't be an easy.
No, it won't.
Toledo's got a really good team out of the MAC.
They really do. Yeah. The MAC is getting better every single year. Like, Akron.
So they start off, they have Arizona, Toledo, Florida. And then soon after, they play a couple tough games, and then they get Arkansas at home. Those are going to be key, absolute key games.
5.
I've got their over/under set at 5.
It has to be 5. Like, and I know Mississippi State fans don't want to hear this, but it's just going to be a challenging year. It just is. Now they'll probably whip UMass and Eastern Kentucky, and they'll probably win a few of those games, but it's not going to be bleak in Starkville.
All right, we're going to get to Missouri. So Missouri, can they be better than last year?
I think they can make the college football playoff.
Let's be honest. Shouldn't that be their expectation? Their goal is college football playoff this year with this team?
I mean, yeah. I mean, with what they brought in, their offense, they return Brady Cook. They bring back Luther Burden. Cody Schrader's not there no more, but they do bring in Marcus Carroll. They got Nate Knoll from Appalachian State. That'd be one of the most deadly combo duos in the country, and them two. They brought 3 starters back up front. I know they got the Oklahoma transfer, Caden Green. This offense is explosive.
Offense, you got Brady Cook, you got Burden. I mean, now they are replacing the running back, but they did bring a transfer in there from that. So, I mean,
they was 3rd in the nation in red zone. Like, they was just like clicked all year long. Like, it was beautiful football. Let's just be honest.
Yep.
What
they get enough credit. They went 11-2, guys. They went 11-2 last year. If they do that again, they're in the college football playoff.
Listen, what Eli Drinkwitz has done with this team and with this program has been nothing short of magnificent. And their defense is going to be a lot better this year.
I mean, the run defense was good. You want to get to defense, their run defense was good. But I'm going to tell you guys, and I don't know if anybody knows this or not, but their pass rush was great.
It was. And I know they added quite a bit of guys from the portal.
They did. They brought in 7 defensive front guys out of the portal.
I know they brought in Zion Turner from Michigan State and Chris McQuillan from Florida. So,
yeah,
I mean, they loaded up on the defensive side of the ball. Now, I think losing Enos Rakestraw is going to be tough in the secondary. He was one of their top guys. Now, they do.
I got to mention the guy, edge rusher. His name is Johnny Walker Red. I mean, Johnny Walker.
Johnny Walker, yep.
Johnny Walker Red. I mean, Johnny Walker. I'm telling y'all, the kid can play some football on the edge. Remember that name.
I'll
What's
also say that Theo Wees is another key. He takes a lot of times he takes the pressure off Luther Burden, and I think he'll help in the passing game.
My keys to the season is enough with the streamlined run of penalties. So if you watched the Georgia game last year, they were right in the Georgia game. They lost 30-21 and could have had a chance to beat them, to be honest with you. But they had a couple turnovers and like 6 or 7, 8 penalties, like pretty quick, back to back. I mean, it wasn't back to back to back to back to back, but I mean, over a short time frame. And those kind of mental errors with the penalties and stuff in the big games, you have to stop.
Here's the key for me. They don't have Georgia this year. They don't get Texas. I don't think they play Ole Miss. They don't even play LSU, Florida, Kentucky, or Tennessee.
Nope.
So,
their schedule. We'll get to that for
that's
sure.
What I mean. That's my key to the season. Like, they can get to the college football playoff with their schedule.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely, they
can start out 4-0 with this.
Key player. I got their running back, Marcus Carroll.
I think he's one. For me, it's Brady Cook.
But I think Brady Cook is proven, and not many people know it.
He is, but I think I just want to see him take another big – like, I know you got to the – the Cotton Bowl last year?
And won.
Against Ohio State. And everybody's going to say, well, they didn't play all their guys. But
Ohio State.
But at the same time, I just feel like I want to see one big step. Can Missouri take that big step is the question. And I think they can.
All right. So my key game with that in mind is Texas A&M. At Texas A&M, October 5th, they most likely will be 4-0 going into Texas A&M. And if you can win this game, 10-2 should be a shoe-in.
Because you start out with Buffalo, you start out with Boston College. I think you got a game in there with – I can't remember the team. I think it was UMass, maybe. Was it UMass?
To be honest with you, I am looking and don't see. Oh, here it is.
I think
their schedule is Murray State, Buffalo, Boston College, and Vanderbilt. That's their 4 games.
When you start out with that, and then now the 50-50
games. Then an open date, and then they play at Texas A&M, at UMass, Auburn at home, at Alabama, open date, Oklahoma at home, at South Carolina, at Mississippi State, and home to Arkansas.
I will say
they really play Texas A&M on the road, and Auburn at home, Alabama on the road, and Oklahoma at home.
There's only two losses there that really are pretty much, I wouldn't say guaranteed, but likely losses, and that's at Alabama.
If you go to Texas A&M and win that game, 10-2 is likely.
It's a good opportunity
in a college football playoff berth,
because now you got 12 instead of 4.
So 9 is where I set their schedule at. Do you think they can do more than 9?
I'll give it 10. I think they're the real deal this year. I mean, you look at their offense. Their offense is going to be special again this year, and I think their defense is going to be much improved. Luther Burden is my sleeper for Heisman. I think he's got a chance to put his name in the hat.
Yeah, I do too. Absolutely. All right. So the next team we're going to go to is welcome to the SEC, Oklahoma. Now, having said that, and I'm not trying to downplay, but last year, let me see if I can get this right here. Oklahoma's schedule was Oklahoma State, Cincinnati, Iowa State, UCF, West Virginia, BYU, TCU. This year, they play Alabama, Ole Miss, Missouri, Tennessee, LSU, South Carolina, Auburn, and 5 of those are away games. Just want to throw that. Welcome to the SEC, Oklahoma. That's all I want to say. All right.
Since we're going at their offense, I will say this about Oklahoma. You know, I know that people are trying to figure out what's going to happen with Jackson Arnold and what he brings to the table, but that's not where I want to go with this. You know, they got a lot of pass catchers in this offense. You know, they got the Purdue transfer, Deion Burks. Nick Anderson returns. Jaleel Farouk is back. Jaden Gibson.
Does losing Jeff Levy hurt them more than losing Dylan Gabriel on the offensive side of the ball here?
I don't think losing Jeff Levy hurts because you still got a stable of guys. And you know, which Seth Littrell, he's been around football and he knows how to move an offense together and bring it together. I mean, let's just say he went at North Texas. They had a high powered offense, so he's not strange from, you know, the biggest question mark for Oklahoma.
I mean, I'm just saying.
The question mark for Oklahoma is their offensive line. Oh, it's got to be better.
Well, their offensive line had nobody in the spring. They lost everybody in the transfer portal. Like, seriously, they lost everybody. Now, I think they got one of them to come back, I think. But they all put their name in the portal. They lost the entire starting line. So the offensive line definitely is a work in progress. And then you got a sophomore in Jackson Arnold that everybody's been touting for a couple of years now. And, you know, he better be great here in the SEC. You're muted.
I had to plug in my laptop.
Yeah, I may have to do it myself. I may have to do that myself. On the defensive side of the ball, it's way past time for Brent Venables to have a stout defense. Don't you think? This is year 3. I mean, we had here at College Sportscast, we have had a little running joke. Their defensive coordinator, his name is Ted Roof. He's been there the last couple of years. And we have had a little running joke here each week. Me and John Roberts will message or talk to each other and we'll say, the roof is on fire. I mean, because their defense 2 years ago was absolutely atrocious. The past year was a little better, but it was atrocious. They finally fired him. They don't have Ted Roof anymore. So you're muted again. So it's time for Brent Venables to have a stout defense, is it not?
It is, and it helps when you bring back Danny Stutzman and Billy Bowman Jr. I think it helps a little bit to bring to bring those guys back. I think it's Brent Venables had some really good defenses at Clemson.
And in Oklahoma.
The main thing with this defense is the sacks have been really missing. You know, they wasn't bad at times, and they weren't really good at times.
Well, I'm going to tell you my key to the season.
Really, nobody lit them up except Texas.
Lit up in the air on defense.
They did. TCU did too.
My key to the season is you absolutely cannot get lit up through the air on defense.
Oh, TCU did the same thing. Wasn't it like 69-45 or something?
Yeah.
Like, and TCU wasn't that great a year ago. So
right. That's what I'm saying. They do
have a deep secondary. Their secondary is loaded. They got Billy Bowman. I think they got Gentry Williams. Woody Washington's on the other side of the ball. Then they got Kendall Dolby and Deshaun McCall.
Their linebackers and their defensive backs should be pretty stout.
My key player for Oklahoma, I guess it'd have to be Jackson Arnold. How does he?
That's what I got. I want to take some of those linebackers that they got because they got some really good ones.
Well,
but
the defense is what it is, but you can't go backwards on offense. And
you can't get rid of Dylan Gabriel.
No.
And not have him come back.
No, you can't.
And then struggle with Jackson Arnold.
You can't lose both ways. No, you can't. He's going to have to hold his own, though. That schedule's pretty rough.
The schedule, we already talked about, the schedule's tough. So
that's what I'm saying.
What's your key game on this schedule? I got the Tennessee game at home. Josh Heupel is coming home as the opponent with Tennessee Vols.
I think it's got to be mine's Auburn. I think, I know Auburn's a tough place to play, but, how do you respond after that non-con schedule and going into your first – I think it's their first SEC game, isn't it?
No, the Tennessee game.
I'm thinking the road game.
It's the first road game.
Yeah. How do they respond on their first SEC road game?
Yeah, those are back-to-back games. The Tennessee game at home and then Auburn on the road, I think. Yep. So they start Temple at home, Houston at home, Tulane at home, Tennessee at home, at Auburn, open date, Texas and Dallas, South Carolina at home, at Ole Miss, Maine, at Missouri, open date, Alabama, and the end of the season at LSU.
I think it's at 8. They should beat Houston, Maine, Temple, Tulane. It's those.
I've got their over/under set at 8.
It's those 3 or 4 games that really concern me.
But I'm gonna be honest with you. Looking at this schedule, I think it's possible that they could be improved and be 7-5.
Yeah, that's a plus from a year ago.
I mean, I really think that that's possible, and 8 would be a really, really good season for them, in my opinion. Just looking at the schedule.
Yeah, he'll be much improved.
All right, Ole Miss. Here's my thing with Ole Miss. It's all set up for Lane Kiffin.
Set up.
Let's be honest with. I mean, you got Kirby Smart, but when you look across the board on the SEC now, without Saban, is Lane Kiffin the second best coach in the SEC?
I think he is next to Kirby. I mean, if you look at who's left in the.
What I'm saying to you is here you go. It's set up for you. You gotta crash through the door.
Mm-hmm.
Like You got to bust open that door. The schedule even is set up for you, I believe. I mean, there's no Bama, there's no Georgia. I mean,
well, my biggest concern with Ole Miss is, there were times when they were off offensively. They lost to Georgia and Alabama, but if you don't go into that stadium with a decent game plan on defense, you might as well forget it.
Let's just call it like it is, man. Their offense is 100 miles per hour and highly efficient.
It's pretty impressive. They get Trey Harris. They got the South Carolina transfer, Bruce Wells, Caden Priesthorn will be an all SEC selection, in my opinion. This Ole Miss, and that's not even going at their backfield. Ulysses Bentley. Then they got the Parrish kid from Miami. And then they got Logan Diggs from LSU.
Yep. And they lost Quinshon Judkins. So, I mean.
Yeah, Ohio State, which that hurts. But, at the same time.
They're still loaded is what I'm saying.
And that's not even talking about their defense. Now, they added a bunch of people from the board.
The defensive side of the ball, one name comes to not mind, and that's Walter Nolan.
Yeah, JJ Pegues will be good too.
I mean, he was the number one player in the transfer portal, defensive tackle, 315 pounds. He's special.
He is. Secondary struggled a little bit last year.
Yeah.
Well, the thing that really killed them last year was, they struggled against quarterbacks who was on fire.
And that's my key to the season is you got to keep offenses from hitting those bombs and those long passes.
Mm-hmm.
Giving up those long passes.
Yep. It was at times a struggle for Ole Miss.
All right. Key player.
Mine's Jared Ivey, the transfer from Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech, the defensive end, the edge rusher.
Yeah, I mean, you add him, the Florida transfer. I call him the Prince.
Princely. Yeah, Prince.
Princely. Yeah, you add him, Walter Nolan.
Princely and Ivey and Nolan. That's their defensive line.
Well, that ain't even counting their linebackers like Chris Paul.
So that's their defensive line. I mean, that's impressive.
It is. And and they did get Trey Amos from Alabama. He was another big key addition to them too. So
they loaded up on the transfer portal.
Key game. I would say this would be at LSU, but that's not where I'm going. I think the key game is at Wake Forest. I know that Wake Forest is not going to – I wouldn't say they're not going to be bad, but they're going to be much improved than they were a year ago. But that's a tough place to play. But that's tough. That's a tough place to play on the road.
I got it at LSU.
Yes, I get that, but I feel like, you play Furman, Middle Tennessee, and then you kind of have an in-between there with Georgia Southern, Kentucky, and at South Carolina. You got to win that game at Wake. Like, Wake is a tough environment to play in as of the last, 3 or 4 years. I think that's going to be a tough environment for them to – because I don't think they're used to going on a –
They start off with Furman at home, Middle Tennessee at home, at Wake Forest game, Georgia Southern at home. Then they get Kentucky at home, South Carolina on the road, at LSU, open date, Oklahoma at home, at Arkansas, Georgia, open date, at Florida, and Mississippi State at home.
And they're missing a few of the big ones too.
There's no Texas
Alabama, Tennessee,
no
Texas.
Texas. There's no Tennessee. There's no Auburn. I mean, Alabama. Um, so I think their schedule sets up for them nicely to have a really good run here. I've got their over under set at 9.5. They went 11 wins last year, 10-2. Can they duplicate that?
I think they can. I think it's 10. I think you set the win total at 10.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to South Carolina. We got Beamer ball.
Beamer ball. Yeah.
So the thing about Beamer ball is it's hot and cold. It's hit or miss.
It's hit or miss.
So they can go through.
If you base rankings solely on potential, South Carolina would be ranked heavy in them every single year.
I mean, they go through stretches where they look really good, and then they go through stretches where they look pitiful.
Yeah, they're Jekyll and Hyde.
Yep, and that's what Beamer ball is, and that's one of my I guess keys, and we'll get to that here in a minute, but can this team be consistent?
I think, they get the quarterback, Lenore Sellers. He's got a really big arm. We just have to see how he's going to do in conference play, and even early in the year when there's some key games early in the year in the non-con, getting Rocket Sanders was big in the backfield. I think that should relieve some pressure off of him. The 5-star Nick Harbor, man, he's got some speed. Listen, if everything comes together for this team, they could win some games. They could be high on my list later in the year, but until you can prove that you belong, I just have a hard time picking you to do the same.
Offensively, their offensive line has to improve. I mean,
it does. Offensive line was
golly. I mean,
he
was running for his life all year last year.
He was.
Their offensive line has to improve. They did get Rocket Sanders on the offense.
Rocket Sanders to me was a big.
So that was a big pickup for them. But I mean, they lose Xavier Legette. They lose Juice Wells. Those hurt on the outside.
It does. I agree with you. The quarterback.
Tight end Trey Knox is a
play. The quarterback play has to be better, though. It has to be locked down.
Okay, defense.
They wasn't good enough.
They're not.
There just wasn't a pass rush last year. I think
secondary's not been great the last 2 years.
It's been really bad. Yeah.
So, is there any pieces there for them to improve on the defensive side of the ball?
Well, I mean, I think they do. They get Demetrius Knight, the transfer from Charlotte. I think he'll help out right away. I think there's a lot of experience and talent in the safety spots. Jalen Kilgore is one of them. I just think the pass rush needs to be a lot better. It was not good a year ago, and they're just going to have to get better. I will give you a name real quick. Tonka Hemingway. If you don't know who Tonka Hemingway is, just get to know him. He's a really good football player on that side of the ball.
Maybe I'll find out this year. I don't know.
Yep.
Excuse me. My keys to the season here for them is you absolutely have to keep people from killing your quarterback all the time.
It was pretty bad last year.
I mean, plain and simple.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about pass rush for them, key player, I got Kyle Kennard, defensive end.
Mine's Raheem Sanders, Rocket Sanders, I think.
Rocket Sanders.
I know people are kind of counting on him, and whatnot, but his injuries took a toll last year. He's been injury prone, but if he can stay healthy, I think he can do some good things for South Carolina.
Oh, he's got all the potential if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, that's the main thing.
Key game. I'm gonna be honest with you, John.
It's Kentucky.
You said it. You said it when Kentucky, when we talked about them. For them, I think it's at Kentucky, second game of the year.
Well, here's the issue with that, because you lose to Kentucky, you play LSU, Ole Miss, at Alabama, and at Oklahoma,
and then Texas A&M after an open date.
Yeah,
so their schedule, looking at it, they stay Old Dominion at home, at Kentucky, LSU at home, Akron at home, open date. Then they get Ole Miss at home, at Alabama, at Oklahoma, open date, Texas A&M at home, at Vandy, Missouri at home, Wofford, and then they end at Clemson.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be like I said, it's going to be a fight to get 6 wins in a bowl game. It's going to be, because you lose that Kentucky game, boy, oh boy.
So that's what I got their record set at, is 6 wins. Do you think they can get to a bowl game? Or are they under? They were 5-7 last year.
Beating Old Dominion. Well, they should beat Old Dominion, Akron. They should beat Wofford and Vanderbilt. But after that, they might not be favored in any of the other 8 games that they play.
Right.
So they're going to have to win one that they're supposed to. Yeah, I just don't think they'll do it. I think they'll win 5.
I think it's possible they go 5-7 and miss. And if they do, does Beamer survive?
That's the question. Does Beamer have to stay another year? I don't think he does, but that's just me.
All right, we're getting to Tennessee now.
Ooh, my camera's going in and out tonight. I don't know what's wrong.
Here's what I want to say about Tennessee. I think it's an interesting time for Tennessee and Josh Heupel. And the reason why I say that is there's quite a bit of expectations for this Tennessee team. But if you look up and down the roster, they're kind of young. This Tennessee team has some in spots, has some young and some inexperience. Are they a year away from challenging for a college football playoff, or do you think they can get it done this year?
I mean, I think there's a good chance that they could be in the mix this year. But I think they're in that position where Tennessee can now be Tennessee again. There's no reason why they can't take another big step under Josh Heupel. You know, they did that in 22.
A big step would be to make the college football playoff. Let's be honest. They've been right there. So a big step would be to make college football playoff this year.
The thing that really impresses me,
I really don't. This team has got some young spots in it. They're talented. They've got a lot of talent.
They do.
I just think they're young in spots. And I think that could come back to bite them as far as the college football playoff. Now, are they going to win 8 or 9 games and be a really good team in the SEC? Of course they are.
Well, and two, they're starting a new full-time quarterback. You know.
Yep.
And they got Dylan Sampson.
There you go with the young again.
Well, and a few new receivers. They got some new receivers. They got Brazil from Tulane. Then they brought back Dylan Sampson. Now there's a lot to replace on the defense.
There's a lot to replace, and it's
a young team.
Talent. They're young talent. A lot of them are young talent.
The question for me is, can they do what they did in 22 with Hendon Hooker this year? And I think they can with the quarterback that they got. I call him Nico because I can't spell his
Yeah,
I can't
I
spell
like
his
Nico more.
last name to save my life, but
I'm not going to
I
butcher
don't want to mispronounce it and make a fool of
Yeah.
myself. So I call him Nico. But
Are they
I
a
think
year? Is it this year, or is this a get to year for next year?
I think it is, but I think this year they can prove some things because they play at Oklahoma early in the year. Then they got Tennessee at home. I think there's a good chance for them to make some noise. And they have the offense to do it because,
The
they bring back
offense, like I said with Lane Kiffin,
Squirrel White.
they play 100 miles an hour, and they're damn efficient doing it.
They do.
Now,
Thornton.
this year, they've got a lot of young talent, young quarterback. Let's see if they are quite as efficient on the offense.
Well, they bring back Squirrel White. They bring back Brew McCoy. They get Thornton. Then they get Chris Brazil from Tulane. Nico's he'll be a full-time starter at quarterback. Then they have the running back Dylan Sampson. So they're going to be, albeit maybe some of them will be inexperienced, young, but it'll be a fun offense to watch play, go at the speed that they go at.
Offensive line, I mean, they lose Mincy to Kentucky.
Mincy to Kentucky, yep.
And he's a good one. So, but they do have some players back. Do you think they'll be just as good offensive line?
I think this year's offensive line for Tennessee could be better than it was a year ago. I do.
I mean, that's fair. They could be.
Yep. And
all right, defense. You got to start with one thing.
James Pierce Jr.
Pass rush.
Yes, sir. James Pierce Jr. He's the dude.
Yeah, I mean, they have the pass rush. That's for sure.
Fourth in the nation in tackles for loss. They was 8th in sacks. They brought the heat, my man.
Yep. And they're back. So on the defensive side of the ball, that is their bread and butter.
Mm-hmm.
Is going after the quarterback. Now, their secondary, they're going to have 5 new players in their secondary. So if you can put an extra guy or two in to block their pass rush, it's possible that you could get something on this Tennessee defense. Now, you can't let them destroy you up front because they can. They have that kind of talent. But if I had to pick a Achilles heel here for the Tennessee defense, it's their secondary.
Key player for me, I think, would have to be Brew McCoy. I think his leadership is a big plus for this team. He comes off a really good year last year, and I think adding Squirrel White back helps. Those would be my two. Is having that leadership on
James
offense.
Pierce Jr. is a pretty good one for a key player here as well.
He is. I just think Nico having those two to come back to, it gives him as a freshman a chance to do some good things.
All right. Here's the big thing for me, and not many people talk about this. Back-to-back years, Tennessee has had over 100 penalties.
Yeah.
They had 111 and 101 in back-to-back years.
Yep. It was
keys to the season here for me. If you want to take that step, that big step that John was talking about, you got to chill on all these penalties. You can't have over 100 penalties again. They are anxious. They're out to rush. They're doing, so they jump a lot and stuff, which I get. I mean, they're twitchy. So, I mean, and it works out when they get the sacks. But you also give up a ton of penalties and penalty yards.
Yep, it's been pretty bad the last couple of years.
Yep. All right, key game.
I think it's got to be NC State and Charlotte. Like,
I can't believe you picked it. I thought you for sure was going to pick another one.
no, I mean it is. I mean because you play at Oklahoma and then you play Florida, Alabama, and at Georgia. Like you got to win that game. Like to at least have a realistic chance. If you want to go to the college football playoff, you got to win that game. Like you might not beat Georgia, but you got to at least win maybe 3 of those.
SEC opener at Oklahoma is a big deal.
It is.
Playing Alabama matters.
I think
a road game at Georgia is a big deal for Tennessee.
Like the only likely loss on this schedule.
The Florida game is a big deal for Tennessee because they've lost 15 of those lately in the last 17 years.
The only likely loss in this schedule is Georgia, if we're being honest.
So the NC State game doesn't seem all that important.
It is because NC State is going to be really good.
20 team. They're ranked like 22 in the coaches poll.
Shout out Justin Grice. He's got a really good,
third or fourth in the ACC this year. They have a chance, an outside shot to dismantle Florida State or Clemson and play in the ACC championship game. They got Grayson McCall. So, I mean, I'm telling you, this NC State team is going to be a good one in Charlotte, September the 7th.
That offense is going to be fun to watch for the Wolfpack.
And it's an early bout here, so we'll see where Tennessee's at early on with these youngsters that I was just talking about. So they start out with Chattanooga, and then that NC State game is the second game of the year in Charlotte. Kent State at home, at Oklahoma, open date, at Arkansas, Florida at home, Alabama at home, open date, Kentucky at home, Mississippi State, at Georgia, UTEP, and at Vandy. I'm going to be honest with you, John. The at Oklahoma and Bama and Georgia
are probably the only three.
Are really the only three that you look at and say, well, they probably don't win those games.
Well, I will say this on that part. They struggle with Florida all the time. And I mean,
I already said that. They're 15-2 in the last 17
what I mean,
Florida.
I know it's at Knoxville, but at the same time, Florida, you let a team like Florida hang around that's got their coach on the hot seat.
Florida usually figures out a way to beat them when they let them hang around.
It just seems, and you don't want to.
I've got their over/under win set at 9 for this year.
I think it's 9, and back to my Florida point real quick before we move on. You don't want a desperate team that's having coaching hot to come in and beat you in a season that it might end up keeping his job, because that win could boost that. So,
oh yeah, absolutely. If they win that and beat Kentucky,
yeah, it could change the whole season.
Yeah. I mean, actually. All right. For the first time ever, the Longhorns, the Texas Longhorns, are in the SEC, and they're loaded, full of talent. Sark has done an absolute heck of a job in the last 2 years, because 2 years ago they were 5-7. In the last 2 years of loading them up with talent to be ready for the SEC. I mean, he's done an absolute heck of a job. They are fully loaded with talent everywhere. I don't care where you look, they have talent.
They do. I mean,
offense, they have 2 5-star quarterbacks, and they got Quinn Ewers, they got Arch Manning just sitting there waiting. They went out and they got Isaiah Bond, wide receiver from Alabama. They got Silas Bolden from Oklahoma State. They got Matthew Golden from Houston. They got Amari Niblick from Alabama, tight end. I mean,
Steve Sarkisian has cranked it up pretty quick, you know, with NFL talent, speed. They've got up to SEC level in the last couple of years.
Their offensive line went from terrible to really, really good in 1 year.
I feel like that with the expanded college football playoff this year, there's just no excuse for Texas not being able to get to the college football playoff with especially with the schedule and the offense that they're going to have. That's not to say, they're bringing their front, like wide receiving core, running back. That's not even mention their 1-2 punch of C.J. Baxter and Jaden Blue.
Yeah,
they get Isaiah Bond, you said, from Alabama. They got Bolden from Oregon State. They got Matthew Golden from Houston. Then they got Amari Niblick from Alabama at the tight end position. Like, this team is loaded from top to bottom, and that's not even going to their defense yet. And this team's going to put up some points, and Quinn Ewers is going to make magic happen because he's a really good quarterback.
They're loaded with talent, and they're going to be very hard to handle this year in the SEC.
They are.
And 2 years ago, I would have laughed at that if I would have said that to myself.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm not even playing.
The whole Texas is back thing.
Defense
needs to be better.
Can their pass rush be better?
It needs to be. Secondary is another area they need work with. They got roasted in 6 of the last 9 games last year on defense. Now, 3 of those or 4 of those, they lost by a touchdown. But, I mean, they're going to have to improve defensively, which they got talent all over.
Was to Kellen DeBoer at Washington.
Yeah, one of them. Yeah. But at the same time, there's so much talent on this Texas team, but they still got to improve defensively, especially in the pass rush and a little bit of work in the back end, I think.
I agree with that. All right.
I think having Anthony Hill at the linebacker, he's one of the best linebackers in the country in the SEC. So I think he'll help, especially at the linebacker position.
Keys to the season, I think the secondary's got to show up.
Yeah, it has to be. Needs to be.
Key player, who you got?
Trey Moore from UTSA. I think he's going to be a star. I think, they added a lot of transfers. They got a lot of receiving core. But getting a guy like him might make an even bigger impact for the defense for next year or for this year.
All right. Key game.
It's got to be Michigan. I mean, at Michigan early on, they got Colorado State early. They got UTSA. There's a couple mini games in between there, but in the Georgia. But you gotta. I wouldn't say you have to win the Michigan game, but you need to make it competitive. Don't go into the big house and get blown out, which I don't think will happen because of, Texas has a lot of talent on both sides of the ball, but you want to at least make it competitive. You got to win. you got to win those other games. Is and Arkansas,
Schedule is Colorado State at Michigan, UTSA at home, ULM, Louisiana Monroe, Mississippi State, open date, Oklahoma and Dallas,
Yep.
Georgia at home,
They play Vanderbilt
at
in the year.
Vandy. And just so you guys know, open date after Vandy, then they play Florida at home, Arkansas on the road, Kentucky at home, and then they do the rekindle the rivalry with Texas A&M at Texas A&M.
I can't wait for that.
So that's going to be an absolutely great game. Okay.
Yeah.
But you might be right. The Michigan game.
It's pretty huge early, because you play that first game against Colorado State, and then you got a pretty easy slate after that. You play UTSA, Louisiana Monroe, and then you play Mississippi State. You should be 1, 2, 3. You should be over-under. You should be 4-1 going into the open day.
I got it set at 10 wins.
That's where I got it. I mean, Texas, to me,
I think it's possible they could get to 11, but
Texas, to me, has no excuse for not getting to at least in a 12 because of the talent that they got this year to get to a college football playoff. Now, there's a few hiccup games in there, like Georgia, Michigan, Texas A&M won't be a pushover because of the rivalry. So, and speaking of Texas A&M, that's where we're going to next.
Yep, Texas A&M. So, what was it? 75, 78, 79, 80 million, something like that they paid to send Jimbo.
Send him on the
road. They bring in Mike Elko, flirted with Mark Stoops, but they bring in Mike Elko. Here's what I want to say about Mike Elko.
One of the most underrated coaches in the country.
He won 16 games at Duke the last 2 years.
Improved them from the depth.
Texas A&M's only won 12 games the last 2 years.
That should be a good sign.
Just saying. I mean, offense at Texas A&M. I mean, Elko runs a really good offense. He had Riley there, the last couple of years at Duke. You have Connor Wigman that's coming back for Texas A&M.
They did lose. They lost Evan Stewart to Oregon. But I think having Moose Muhammad, and then they got Thomas, then they got Jaden Walker. I think Connor Wigman has some playmakers to make things happen for Texas A&M.
There's no Aeneas Smith.
There's not. Now, the running back core is going to be kind of fresh. It's going to be really young with Owens and that group. They're going to be really young. If I'm not mistaken, ain't one of them Emmitt Smith's son? He's one of them.
Yes.
He's going to be there. I can't think of his name right off the top of my head. He's one of them.
They got 2 really good tackles on that offensive line, so that's a good starting point.
Yeah.
So they on the offensive side there. There's some pieces there. I mean, the talent levels is not bare. They lost a lot, but they had a lot of talent on this team the last 2 years. So
EJ Smith, who he is, the son of Emmitt Smith. Yeah, he plays for A&M.
So defense, kind of hit or miss.
It was. The pass rush was good. The run defense were the best in SEC. But when it broke down, it broke down.
Yep.
When They was 0-5.
So they were 7-0.
Yeah, they was.
Yeah, they were 7-0 when they allowed less than 250 yards of total offense.
Yeah, I think adding Purdue, Nick Scruton to the mix, I think, should make up for a loss of some guys. He's going to put up some numbers. Now, Nolan went to Ole Miss. I think the interior will be fine. You know, they got Shamar Turner, Albert Regis. They got the transfer from Florida, Stubby Williams. Torian York is coming off a really good freshman year. So Texas A&M has got some pieces, and they added a bunch of guys in the portal. I think Bryce Anderson will be in the secondary. He'll be a great guy in the nickel spot. So, and I don't think Mike Elko is going to let this defense go to waste either. Like he's a really good coach, hard-nosed. I think he's going to get this defense back to where it needs to be.
I think a key for this year, I think their secondary's got to kind of be a rock for them.
It does. I think that adds to the key player, like, is Tyreek Chappelle. You know, he's one of the leaders of this secondary with a bunch of new guys, and I think he's going to have to be the veteran that steps up and takes control of this defense. And I think he's going to have to play really locked down defensively and help with the leadership on that defensive side of the ball for the Aggies.
Yep, I agree. All right, key game.
I would say it would be Texas, but
it's just too late in the season.
That's so late in the year. Like
that's the last game of the year. Beating Notre Dame right off the bat would be a pretty big accomplishment.
Be a pretty big start, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's one of them, but I think at Florida is huge because Florida is going to play Miami already, right?
Yeah.
Well, and Florida's probably going to play Sanford. Say Florida beats Miami, and A&M's coming in this game 1-1. Florida might be playing for a lot more than what A&M's playing for.
Yeah.
And I think a loss there would put A&M at 1-2. And that would add more pressure to Florida because it's giving them another game that they've won that could get them to a bowl game. And I think that early game with Florida is a huge deal in my opinion. I think the Notre Dame game's a huge game too, though.
All right, so they start the season off Notre Dame. That's at home, by the way. McNeese State at Florida, Bowling Green. Then they get Arkansas. That's a neutral site game. Missouri, open date at Mississippi State. LSU at South Carolina, open date. New Mexico State at Auburn, and finish the season with Texas at home.
Yeah, I got them at 8. I mean, which they're missing the top two. Actually, the top 3 probably Alabama, Georgia, and Oklahoma. Well, no, Ole Miss. I'm sorry. So there's a good chance that they could slide in and get 8 wins in this schedule. There's 8
That's
wins.
what I had them set at was 8 wins, so I'll go with that as well.
Because you got LSU and Missouri at home, and there's no excuse to not have a really good season with a chance to do some really good things in his first year.
All right, Vanderbilt. This was alphabetical order, guys, so we are going to Vanderbilt.
I knew you was going to say that.
So, Vandy, I mean, here's my deal. So, looking at their schedule, there's at least 3 wins looking at their schedule. I think if you're Vandy, you got to hope to get 1 or 2 more. And if you could get to that 5-win level, if you are Vandy, if by chance you could get to a 5, even 4-win level, then you've improved from last year, especially if you can find a way to win one SEC game. And then there is maybe some hope that Clark Lee is turning things around with Jerry Kill and some of the new offensive stuff that he brought in from New Mexico State.
Well, the biggest problem that Vandy's going to have, which I know they get Diego Pavia. He was the transfer from New Mexico State. He's the one that beat Auburn for all those. John Roberts, if you're sitting at home, I know you don't want to hear his name, but he was the one that beat Auburn. But
so they went out after that win at Auburn, by the way. They went out, got the offensive coordinator, the head coach, and the quarterback from New Mexico State. Just so you guys know.
See, here's what gets me is I understand Vanderbilt is trying to improve the offense, but they lost 3 of their best wide receivers.
Yeah.
Humphreys, Shepard, and McGowan.
Yeah.
London Humphreys went to Georgia. Will Shepard went to Colorado, and Jay McGowan went to Boston College. I mean, they were the top 3 targets. Now, they do bring back Junior Sherrill and Quincy Skinner, but you're missing a majority of their main guys that they used in that offense.
And this was already the worst offense in the SEC.
It was. Now, don't get me started on the offensive line. It was atrocious last year. It was really, really bad. Now, they got a bunch of transfers on that. So, hopefully, Coach Lee can figure it out and get the offensive line situation figured out, because it couldn't be no worse than what it was a year ago.
Yeah, they brought in a bunch. They lost a lot and
I know they brought in Stephen Hubbard from UTEP. He was a big transfer for them at guard.
All right, defense. Clark Lee's taken over the duties of defensive coordinator.
Listen, if you watch Vanderbilt football last year and you watch this defense play,
sorry,
Lord help us. And I don't mean that disrespectfully towards Vanderbilt, but it was atrocious. They was last in the nation in total defense. They couldn't stop anything. The pass rush was not good. They couldn't get in the backfield. They have to get pressure on the quarterback. That's the main key for this defense. They just couldn't do it.
So the linebackers are decent, and the secondary is decent.
Langston Patterson is back. I think Prince Colley is going to be a really good edge rusher. I think from the outside.
Ricky Wright, C.J. Taylor.
They're really good. I know they got the transfer from TCU, Randall Fontenette, and then they got the Eastern Washington cornerback Marlon Jones. So they've added some guys in the portal. So hopefully you'll see some improvements. My biggest thing is their third down stops.
There's my key to the season right there.
Get off the field, man. If you can get off the field.
So third down conversion was 47% against them last year.
If you can make stops, you're going to give you a chance to win. But if you can't make stops, you're basically just giving the offense up and down the field all night long. That's impossible to accomplish. So
key player.
I think it has to be Diego Vega. I think quarterback play is going to be huge. Where does he come up with key guys at the wide receiver position?
He also brought in Eli Stowers.
They did from
and he's from New Mexico State as well.
And people forget that he was a top recruit for Texas A&M back a couple of years ago.
Right.
So he's a really good pass catcher. He's he's actually a part-time quarterback too. So their key game to me, I've been looking up and down this schedule.
It's Virginia Tech.
It has to be. they're not going to be favored in probably in any of these SEC games.
Nope.
I feel like there's a good chance they could go 4-0 in non-con because they play Alcorn State, which they do get an out-of-conference game at Georgia State. That won't be an easy game. Georgia State's actually decent, team that's improved.
But their big out-of-conference game is Georgia Tech. I mean,
Virginia Tech.
Virginia Tech. I'm
if
sorry.
they could somehow win this game, I'm not saying it's going to be an easy game to win, but if they could somehow beat Virginia Tech,
they have a shot at being 4-0. If they can beat Virginia Tech, they have a shot at being 4-0.
Yeah, a real great shot.
They play Virginia Tech at home, Alcorn State, at Georgia State.
Yep.
My bad. It's 3-0.
3-0, yeah.
And then at Missouri. They're not beating Missouri at Missouri.
Well,
it's 3-0.
It's
then they have an open date. Then they have an open date, and then they play Alabama at Kentucky, Ball State at home, Texas at Auburn, South Carolina at home, open date at LSU, and Tennessee at home. That's their schedule.
It's going to take something special, or maybe a few bad games for somebody on the other side for Vanderbilt to have a winning season. But it's going to be an interesting season, though, to say the least. Like, win or lose. Like, you beat Alcorn State, Georgia State, and Ball State, and you got probably 3 wins right there. Hopefully,
and if you can beat Virginia Tech, there's 4. And then if you could sneak one SEC win, you got 5.
South Carolina.
And I think that Vanderbilt would be ready to give him another year to see if he can build on that.
Well, and then maybe pull a shocker against Kentucky or
South Carolina at home.
I mean, but I just don't see it with this schedule because they play Virginia Tech, Alcorn State, at Georgia State, at Missouri, open date, Alabama at home, at Kentucky, Ball State at home, home against Texas, at Auburn, home against South Carolina, open date at LSU and Tennessee. Which
I got it set at 3.5.
That's where I got it, 3.5. It's going to be a tough season. It is what it is.
If they can steal that win at home against Virginia Tech, who is going to be an improved team, by the way, out of the ACC.
Very improved, which we'll talk about them next week. But
yeah, so, if they could steal that game, they have a chance to be at 4. And then if they could steal one SEC game somewhere, they get 5. And I think that's basically the max for this Vanderbilt team.
Well,
somewhere between 3 and 5.
you got to steal the game against South Carolina or Kentucky if you really want a shot, because you're not going to beat at Missouri. You're not going to beat Alabama. You're not going to beat Texas. And then you're surely not going to win at Auburn. And you're not going to win at LSU. And then you play the rival game against Tennessee. So you're going to have to upset either Kentucky or South Carolina or Virginia Tech to have a shot at a bowl game. Like, it's going to
all right, John, we got to wrap this up. It's been forever, and my computer is going to die on me. So we do have to wrap this up. But we're going to move on to the championship game. Who do you think? What 2 teams make it to the championship game? SEC championship.
I mean, if you're looking at talent, it's Georgia and not Texas. Like, they're the top 2, I think. That's who'll be playing, I think, for the championship. And I think Georgia will be your winner. I think Georgia's going to be as good as they was a year ago. They was undefeated and didn't get the championship. But I think this is one of those times where it's like a revenge thing, and I think they'll come back even better this year, and they'll be even better to get back into the playoff.
I think if you look at schedules, I think Texas and Ole Miss have an advantage, I think, over some of the other top teams. I think Ole Miss should be shooting to get there. I also think Missouri should be shooting to get there. And being 10-2 and have a chance to get in the championship game here. But I do agree with you. I think Texas and Georgia are the two best teams, and I can't go against Georgia. I mean, it would be kind of sad to me if Texas comes in first year and wins the SEC. All right, player of the year. Who you got?
Michael Williams from Georgia.
Defensive guy?
Yeah.
Okay. Didn't expect that.
Yeah, going on a limb here.
All right. Well, I'm going Luther Burden. I know the quarterbacks will get all the pub, but I'm going to go Luther Burden from Missouri.
My runner up would probably be Carson Beck. I think he's going to have I wouldn't say a bounce back year. I think he's going to be more improved than he was a year ago. So.
All right, last question, and we will wrap this up. How many SEC teams makes the new 12-team playoff, college football playoff?
I think 4 at the most.
I think 4 definitely get in. I think there's a chance that the SEC gets 5.
The last one would probably be Missouri, if we're being honest.
I think there is a chance the SEC gets 5. I'm almost guaranteeing that 4 gets in. But I do think there is a chance that the SEC gets 5 teams into the 12-team playoff this year.
I think 4 of those are Alabama, Texas, Georgia, Ole Miss, and then the other one would be Missouri if they slide into that other spot.
Yeah, I got, of course, Georgia and Texas, Ole Miss, Alabama, Missouri.
We speak on it earlier, Tennessee, but they're going to have a lot of their way for them to do that. It's possible, though.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee's not far off of that. So, they can beat Alabama, then they'll take Alabama's spot.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just that simple.
Yeah.
So, all right. I hope you guys enjoyed this. This has been long as all out. These things are long. We try to get through each team. Maybe we need to split this up into 2 times. Do a front half and a back half.
Maybe so, yeah.
All right, home field. Can't miss kickoff. Check it out. There's new stuff dropping in 3 days. They got college football premium boxes. There are 54 new teams. They're being released. Check it out. Use our code CSCast for a 15% discount, or go to greenvillesportsmedia.com and use our link to place your orders. We would appreciate that. And then last but not least, follow College SportsCast on Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, X, those Twitter handles, and then go to greenvillesportsmedia.com for all of our stuff that we write and our podcast and everything else. We cover lots of different stuff. So, guys, this has been one heck of a long show, but maybe we'll split this up next week into 2 shows, because the next 2 conferences, we're going to do ACC next week. The next 2 conferences are 18 teams, and these 2 have been 16.
Yep. So it's going to be
So maybe we should split it up into 9 and 9.
Yeah, maybe 9 on Tuesday night. Maybe do one on Friday, maybe Friday or something.
Or Tuesday and Wednesday or something to split
Tuesday
it up.
and Wednesday, yeah. But next week's the ACC.
It is the ACC. But like I said, guys, these are long. We may split it up and do it on back-to-back nights. So I appreciate it. If you guys hung in with us this long, y'all are some dedicated fans. That's all I got to say.
Of football, yeah.
Hopefully you would.
Hey,
14,
I'm so hungry for football. I listen to Beth Mowens right about now.
If you hung in with us this long,
congrats.
I'm going to give you a clap.
Congrats.
All right. Y'all have a good night. We will see you next week for the ACC.
Have a good one.